Howdy my totally tubular gamers, we are back with another video, and today we got a pretty personal one. I'm going to be talking about the scariest video games I've ever played. Now throughout the years I have played tons and tons of video games, over 2,000 video games, and I've played plenty of horror games. I've had tons of games just scare the hell out of me. From those quick little surprises like a boo, to those really unsettling, getting under your skin moments, or just a straight up scare where I actually jump out of my chair and scream like a little baby. Tons of games have scared me in a variety of different ways. I'm not afraid to admit it, I get pretty scared while I'm playing some of these games. As I've gotten older and more paranoid, I actually get more afraid while playing these games. I feel like as I became more mature, I became more aware of my surroundings. I get startled really easily, and yeah, some of these games scared me so much and got so deep under my skin, I was ready to bring the nightlight back out. And you can go ahead and call me little baby Jonathan, goo goo gaga, wah wah wah. He gets scared from little game, what little baby, stupid little bitch.
Oh, boo-hoo. Let me play a sad song for you on the world's smallest violin.
But at the very least, I know I'm not alone in saying that I've gotten scared by tons and tons of video games, and today we're going to talk about what are, in my opinion, the 10 scariest games. Now, horror and getting scared are completely subjective. What I find scary, what you find scary, likely is going to be pretty different. We might share a few titles here and there, but everybody's going to be completely different when it comes to the scariest games. This is just my list. This is based off of my experiences, my fears, and it really is as simple as that. You might agree, you might disagree, you might think some other games are really scary, you might think none of these games are scary, you might never have been scared by a video game before, which I highly doubt. But hey, that might be you. Either way, let me know down below what you believe to be the scariest games. These are, yeah, the top 10 scariest games that I personally have ever played, ranked from least scary to most scary for a variety of different reasons. So take a seat, grab some popcorn, get the beef jerky, get the Wendy's Krabby Patty or whatever the fuck it is. I got one, it tasted like dog shit. I don't know what I expected. I worked at Wendy's for 6 months and it tastes the same, still like ass. I'm Jonathan. We're going to be talking about some totally tubular scary games. I do want to give a shout out before we begin, and that is for Abe Ferroni. Thank you very much for supporting the Patreon. I really do appreciate it. Thank you all for supporting the Patreon if you do. Either way, please like, share, comment, subscribe. Super thanks is also there. Any support is truly greatly appreciated. So let's get to the number 10 spot, the 10th scariest game I've ever played. So here we have a game that just does not get talked about nearly enough, and that is Condemned Criminal Origins. This underrated horror game from the mid-2000s actually tried to do something somewhat different. It takes place from a first-person perspective, and it sees you playing as a detective investigating a series of really fucked up murders where people's body parts like their lips have been removed and you're investigating those. Yeah, it's pretty sick shit. As you're investigating areas in these crime scenes, a bunch of crazy people will usually jump out at you. And while you do occasionally get firearms in this game, this is actually a very melee-focused game, well before Dead Island and Dying Light. A majority of the combat really is melee focused, and while you do get some conventional melee weapons, you know, like a baseball bat or something like that, this game for the most part goes for non-traditional weapons, where people are really just grabbing whatever they can get their hands on to hurt you. For instance, my favorite level, the level that scared me the most, that takes place in a high school, sees people ripping off locker doors and trying to beat you to death with them. Just very unconventional weapons like that, and I don't know, it just added to the vibe of this game that like these people were ready to kill you with whatever they had. And I remember when I was younger, this game really creeped me out, but as I get older now, yeah, this was one of those games that really did get under your skin. Like, not only are the murders actually really nasty, but they're incredibly gruesome, grotesque, and just straight up gory. Like, this game just makes you feel incredibly uncomfortable with these murders. These people were just brutally killed. And then, of course, what also makes the game scary is the amount of jump scares that show up and the amount of times you just get straight up surprised or startled by people coming out of the woodwork to come beat your ass. The game is pretty dark, even with the flashlight, and so people are really able to sneak up on you, and it doesn't matter if it's the first, second, or fifth time, I was getting scared by these people just because I was getting startled. There was also just something about this game's graphics, its vibe, its general presentation that also just stuck with me. It's like right in between Xbox to Xbox 360 when it comes to the graphics. It's not a great looking game, but it just had a certain feel to it that I really just can't quite put my finger on. It's just from the era. Like, you look at it and you can guess when it came out. There was only a few years where games look like this. Stuff like Fear 1, Hitman Blood Money, and Quake 4 are other great examples, but in Condemned, it just hits differently. Overall, this is an underrated scary game that not enough people people are talking about. This game desperately needs a re-release, and I think more people should experience it. And yes, I am aware there's a Condemned 2, but I have actually never played it. I don't know, I just haven't sat down and tried it. I've had it forever though. So here's a game that's bound to make some people roll their eyes, and I have the original Outlast. I got no shame in admitting it. I get scared by all types of horror games, from classic survival horror games to these more cat and mouse hide and seek horror games. They're all scaring me at some point, and Outlast, it absolutely did. This is a very, very dark, fucked up game that sees your main character going to like some mental asylum to do a story, but ends up trapped in it, and so he's just trying to escape. I'm also throwing in the Whistleblower DLC because that DLC is just as fucked up and scary as the main game. This game has no problem just showing you straight up gore and messed up scenarios on a pretty regular basis. The graphics were very impressive for the time. Even nowadays, it's still pretty impressive. This was basically an indie game, and I think it looks incredible given the budget. But it also really does add to the horror. Like, these people, they look very real, and the things that they do to other human beings, yeah, it looks a little too real for my liking. This game has plenty of creepy and disturbing moments, especially in the DLC when you like get locked in the box. Really, any of the scenes with the doctor are pretty horrible. Like, this is not a nice video game, that's for sure. The presentation and the vibe, along with the atmosphere, it's gonna get to you, and if it doesn't, it eventually will. Then we come to the actual gameplay, which is very much cat and mouse. You gotta go hide from the enemies, you can't fight back, which I know a lot of people don't like and don't find scary, but man, this game still got me plenty of times. When I wasn't running away in fear or jumping in my seat just because one of them surprised me, the game was actually pretty decent at building up tension, constantly upping the ante, and it got to a point where I was like, okay, we're going through some bathrooms, we're going through the showers, and then a bunch of naked jack dudes come after you, and I'm like, oh my god, they're in the showers, 18 naked cowboys coming after me. That part's always just gonna live in my head, along with the ending parts of this game, which aren't as scary as the rest of the game, and the ending is actually pretty stupid in my opinion, but the game was quite effective in making me go to sleep with the lights on, and I haven't really wanted to play through it since, just because, yeah, I do think it is a scary game, and it's very loud with its sudden noises, and while I'm sure a bunch of people will say, oh, it's just cheap thrills and cheap horror jump scares, man, it still got me. It is also worth bringing up that there is Outlast 2 and the Outlast Trials. I think Outlast 2 also has some scares, but it really didn't get me anywhere near as much as the first game or the DLC. And the Outlast Trials, well, I was just laughing with my friends too much to truly be all that scared while playing it. But I think they're all scary games, but the first one is easily the scariest by quite a bit. And so our next game, yeah, it's one of those games. It's Slender the 8 Pages. Now, before you say I posted cringe and unsubscribe, hear me out for a second. I also am a little embarrassed that I think this game is as scary as it is. It is not complex. It is not nuanced with its horror or its scares, and it absolutely goes for the lowest, and I mean lowest hanging fruit. Like, the fruit is on the fucking ground at this point, but damn it, sometimes that does actually get me. I will say, when it comes to the world building or the atmosphere or the vibes or presentation or anything like that, this game absolutely does not have it. It does not have anything like that. All of the horror and all of the scares come entirely from the sound design. The sound design really picks this game up from being just a pile of crap to a shiny pile of crap that actually does manage to scare me, because the Slenderman himself, you know, a cool design and all, but a tall white guy isn't going to be scaring me. All of these sound effects though, the loud ass noises, the sudden jump scares, yeah, that actually is able to scare me. Once you start getting the pages, you just hear these ridiculously, comically loud footsteps, and at first you might laugh, you might giggle, you might be like, ooh, he's coming for you, but as you play throughout the game, it really does tear you down. It starts to wear you down, and yeah, eventually it does build to the general tension, and then seeing him off in the distance and the screen flickering and hearing all of the sound effects, yeah, that actually does get to me. Again, his design doesn't really get to me. This gameplay certainly doesn't get to me until you get like the last page, and then you're just like, oh shit, oh shit. It's all of the sound effects. It's really everything to do with the sound all coming at you at once, and it can be a little overstimulating, but it's also why I find this game even remotely scary. I'll just say it isn't exactly complicated as to why I find Slender the 8 Pages scary or terrifying in the slightest. There was also the real Slender game, Slender the Arrival, and I played through this, and yeah, it got me like once or twice, but I don't know, after playing the original game, it was really hard to just kind of recreate that magic, and I didn't find it anywhere near as scary. Maybe if the order I played these games was reversed, then I think Slender the Arrival is the scarier game, but this is based off of my experiences. Look, Slender is clearly not for everybody, and I know there are a lot of people who don't find it scary and think this kind of horror is really annoying, so I'm just gonna move on. I got scared by the game. I did, unfortunately. So our next one is a bit of a newer one. It's actually Amnesia: The Bunker. So this game is the very rare World War I game, and it sees you trapped in a bunker with this monster, and you've actually got to manage some resources. Now, this game's pretty different from the other Amnesia games, and I do think the other Amnesia games are actually scary, especially that original one, but man, the bunker really hit different. Despite the fact that you actually can kind of fight off the monster, this game is actually really great at building tension. You're constantly managing a fuel source for the power, and very frequently you're gonna have to go out and get fuel, and this really builds a great sense of tension. Like, the tension is palpable in this game. Palpable, I tell you. Sure, it's not the longest game, the monster isn't the scariest or the smartest, but this game, the tension gets so thick you could cut it with a fucking knife, man. And it really just keeps building up more and more and more, and when the monster finally does show up or spooks you or you just even hear it, man, it makes me jump like a little scaredy cat or something, like when a cat jumps on foil or sees a cucumber. I'm not gonna lie, that's probably how I'm gonna react when I see a cucumber. Those cucumbers actually be pretty scary. Just like Amnesia: The Bunker, the monster, it actually does follow you a majority of the game. It tries to kind of emulate Alien Isolation's Alien, and it's nowhere near as smart as that game's, and it doesn't stalk you that much, but it's still following you a good amount of the time, especially when you're running back to the base. And oh, it made me feel just all kinds of uncomfortable. You're being watched basically the entire game, and then by the end of it, you're just like, get me the fuck out of this bunker. Get me literally anywhere but this bunker. And I think the ending is actually pretty solid. Something else that adds to the tension and makes this game just a little bit scarier, but it certainly does, is the fact that World War I is currently going on above you. There's constant shaking from bombs and other wartimey things, and there's actually one point where you stick your head out of the bunker and you can get sniped. Like, you can actually get killed because it's still a war going on at the end of the day. It all comes together to create just this incredibly oppressing, dark atmosphere that none of the other Amnesia games can capture. Again, I think The Dark Descent is actually pretty scary. That game really did scare me quite a few times, especially back in the day, but for me now, as an adult, it's The Bunker. Not even close. And I'd rather not talk about the two other Amnesia games. So here we got one you might not expect, and that is Until Dawn. Now, Until Dawn is a very different game from all the other games on this list. This was developed by Supermassive, and it's just like Supermassive's other games. If you've played The Dark Pictures or The Quarry, you'll know exactly what to expect here. It's a very cinematic experience. And not only do I think Until Dawn is a way better game than the games I just mentioned, but I also think it's significantly scarier, to the point that, yeah, this is one of the scariest games I've ever played. From just the basic ass title screen scaring me, to the many jump scares this game has, I really didn't want any of my characters to die off, and yeah, a lot of these jump scares were getting me. The game is actually pretty decent at building tension, and it really actually does have the production to back this game up, something that the Dark Picture games were clearly missing. Like, this game was a great looking game for the time. I know there's the remaster, remake, whatever you want to call it. I've never messed around with that. I've only ever played the original game. I thought it looked great for the time, and it really allowed this game to just build a totally unique, different kind of atmosphere, and I didn't know what was going to happen next. It made me uncomfortable, and I wanted to see what was going to happen to my characters. I didn't particularly like any of them all that much. You're not really supposed to, but I didn't want any of them to get killed. And yeah, this game, it scared me a few times, and it really did actually start to creep me out. Some of the characters, they do some crazy shit. And I don't really want to spoil anything, so I'll just say that the twists are really good in this game. And if you've played Supermassive's other games and you've played Until Dawn, you'll probably know what I mean when I say that all of their other games are a little derivative of this game's twists. Like, they really struck gold with Until Dawn and created something truly special and terrifying, and it feels like they've low-key been trying to recreate it since. And I certainly don't think they've been able to. I'm sure there are plenty of people that'll go, this game isn't scary at all, you're barely even playing it, you're watching it a lot of the time. You haven't been scared by a horror movie that you just watched? Yeah, I'm watching a lot of the game or barely interacting with it. Doesn't mean I wasn't scared by it. Horror can really transcend mediums, and in this case it absolutely does. It doesn't matter that it's not the most involved game with a ton of mechanics. It still scared the heebie-jeebies out of me. I remember playing it with my partner. She was just terrified. She didn't even want to play the game half the time. And I remember just sitting there with my orange juice mimosa laughing and getting the crap scared out of me. It was a really good time. I love Until Dawn. It's my favorite of their games, and it is scary. So here we got a total classic. We have the original Fatal Frame. Now Fatal Frame, it's a pretty scary series, and I know there'll be plenty of people who are like, really, you're going with the original, not Fatal Frame 2 or 3 or one of the later ones? No, I'm going with the original game. This game, it actually hit different, and it scared me more than the other ones. This game is very disturbing, creepy, and is the definition of a game getting under your skin. I felt very uncomfortable while I was playing this game, especially by the end of it. It takes place in the 80s, and it sees this poor girl going into this scary ass house, and then her other sister has to go rescue her. And I remember actually sitting down and playing this one with my siblings way back in the day, and they thought it was incredibly unsettling and looked away and asked me to stop playing, but my dumbass just kept playing, and yeah, it just kept getting creepier and creepier. The entire story and setting just goes really out there, and there's some twisted shit in this game. I'll just say, when it comes to that atmosphere, the presentation, the world, the vibes, the characters, they really did a bang up job with it. When it comes to the actual gameplay, that also scared me quite a bit. The ghosts are actually genuinely terrifying in this game. This game might have the scariest ghosts in the entire series, this or the second game. Like, these fuckers are creepy to look at, they're creepy to hear, like you just want to get away from them as fast as possible, and then they just swarm you. Oftentimes you get totally swarmed, and you can actually like run out of film in this game also. They don't give you just straight up unlimited film like some of the later games. There is some real tension when it comes to the item resource management. It actually really adds to the horror, and I think this game in general does a great job at building tension, staying dark, and keeping you on the edge of your seat. And by the end of it, I was like, wow, that game really made me feel something, and I also never want to play it again. Like, fuck, that was a scary game. And this part is totally true. It like genuinely terrified my little sisters to the point where they were like, please do not play any of the other games. And legit, I didn't play any other Fatal Frame games for like a decade. It wasn't until very recently, when a bunch of you started asking me to look at the series, that I was like, you know what, I guess I'll take another crack at these. And yeah, they're all pretty scary, but that original one, oh, that original one, really, I don't want to go back to it. I genuinely do not want to go back to it. That was a pretty scary game. So here's a game I haven't actually talked to death yet, and that is Alien Isolation. Now, we all know Alien Isolation. It's the game where you get hunted by the alien like the entire game, and all these years later, like a decade later, which is pretty crazy, this is still one of the scariest video games ever made. Not only do I believe that it is like the best alien game ever, but this game has some of the smartest artificial intelligence I've ever seen in a video game. I also think that this game's presentation is nothing short of phenomenal, not just for when it came out, but even nowadays. The lighting, the world, the design of these areas, it's all really great stuff, and the alien looks incredible. The animation is just superb. The way it moves around is so scary. And then yeah, it's absolutely smart as hell. This game really was able to scare me for a variety of reasons, but most of them can all be pinpointed to the alien. Yeah, the AI were able to scare me a few times, but the alien is really what scared me a majority of the time. It is able to predict and figure out what you're going to do, and this isn't just some basic prediction it's going to make like some other games. No, this fucker's actually smart, and by the end of it, it felt like he was able to read like a lot of my moves, and a lot of my strategies that I used at the beginning of the game just straight up did not work here. At the beginning of the game, I was hiding in the vents all the time. The alien starts checking the vents. He knows you're going to be there. Another thing that I always did was I saved a lot. I just saved a lot. I didn't want to lose any progress. This fucker was killing me when I was trying to save. It happened several times. It always got me. Like, this game actually had me getting the shit scared out of me. It got to the point where I couldn't even predict what the alien was going to do next. Forget it predicting me, I was just fucking scared. I felt like I was acting just on pure fear here, hoping it doesn't get me, hoping he's not able to predict what I do next. Like, even though you can kind of fight back towards the end when you get the flamethrower, this game, it really did make me feel incredibly uncomfortable. It builds up tension, and it just keeps building and building and building throughout the entire game. Like, this is a very tense game, and all these years later, very few games have been able to scare me as much as Alien Isolation. I'm incredibly excited we're getting a sequel. I'm sure it's going to be just as scary as this one. Fuck it, make the alien even smarter. Why not? Like, yeah, the game might be challenging, but we need scary ass games like this. We need games that will actually just make you shit your pants, piss your pants, shit and cum, whatever it is. Sometimes you want to be just terrified when you play a video game, and Alien Isolation is absolutely that. So here we got a certified banger. It is Silent Hill 3. Now Silent Hill is no stranger to being scary. Almost every Silent Hill game is scary to some degree, but I really do think the third game is the scariest of them all. This game is able to create just this really dark, twisted, scary, unsettling world that the other Silent Hill games just don't have. Don't get it twisted, I think the original game is actually quite scary. It's scarier than this game in certain aspects, and the second game is full of scares. The fourth game actually is a lot of scares as well. But the third game, this one really is the one that actually made me feel mad uncomfortable pretty much right from the beginning. You play as just this teenage girl, Heather, and she's just trying to live a normal life, and this poor girl, she just gets tormented beyond belief. Monsters and shit shows up, this cult shows up, she goes to Silent Hill. It's all bad. It is all bad. And this game genuinely made me feel very uncomfortable majority of the time I was playing it. And the further and further you get into this game, the scarier and darker it gets. While it starts out, you know, decently scary in this mall with all these fucking locked doors, the last few areas of this game, that is some of the scariest shit I've ever seen in like a video game. These areas are terrifying. This game doesn't have, you know, a ton of jump scares or a bunch of loud sounds and sudden things happening, but it's one of those games that really plays the long game and sits with you long after you've beaten the game. It was one of those games that I thought about for a very long time. And this was one of the games that made me want to sleep with the fucking nightlight on after I finished. I was like, man, that game was just fucked up. That was a scary game. Like, it didn't have a ton of moments where it made me jump out of my seat and scream like a little girl, but it was one of those games that just kind of broke me down on the inside and just made me scared of everything that was going on. I guess that's why they call it psychological horror. This game, it goes for a different kind of horror than most of the games I've talked about today, and I think it's really effective when it comes to that psychological horror. Again, the other Silent Hills, they got plenty of scary moments, especially 2, but they aren't Silent Hill 3. If they ever remake this game, I'd be very surprised to see if they're able to capture just that incredibly unsettling vibe that this game has in nearly every aspect. Oh, and the awesome original soundtrack. The OST for this game, I've been listening to it since I played the game, honestly, it's so good, but that's a story for a different day. I think that if you're looking for the scariest game on PS2, which there is a lot of scary PS2 games, none of them are scarier than Silent Hill 3. So in the number 2 spot, we have Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Yes, I do have a Five Nights at Freddy's game on the list. Now, hey, hear me out for a second. I genuinely do think Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is actually terrifying on several levels. It's more than just the low-hanging fruit of the other Five Nights at Freddy's games. I think this game is actually really able to build up its atmosphere and tension. Let me try to explain. This is the FNAF where you play as the small child in your room, checking the door, seeing if they're out in the hallways, and of course checking the closet as well. Now the jump scares themselves, they're scary. The monster design, it's pretty scary. I think the monster designs, the animatronics, the way they look are also pretty scary. Like, this is just straight nightmare fuel. I've never seen so much teeth on something before. These are scary. All of that certainly adds to the horror, but what really makes this game as scary as it is for me is when you open the door and you look into the darkness to listen and try to hear their breathing. I find this just the scariest fucking thing. Like, maybe it's just to a ridiculous point, but staring into the unknown, trying to hear the breathing, potentially turning the light on, knowing that they're there, I hate this. I absolutely just hate this. I cannot deal with it. And this actually gets me. This totally gets me, and it's to the point where I can't play this game for more than like an hour or an hour and a half because it just keeps scaring the absolute hell out of me, and I can't take that, man. My heart just can't take that. And it only gets worse the more you play the game. Sure, you can actually get pretty used to the breathing, but I feel like I just never got a good grip on like hearing the breathing. Maybe that's just a skill issue, but I always feel like I was just okay at best, and sometimes it really felt like I was guessing, and it's like, I know it could be there. I damn well know it could be there, and then I'm also checking the bed, I'm checking the closet, and it's like, you're just a defenseless child here. You're not just some underpaid overnight worker. You're a freaking little kid here. This shit is scary. I don't care what anybody says. I dare anybody to play this game for like an hour and try to not at least get startled. Sure, You could say it's just going for those cheap jump scares that this series is known for, but I really do think FNAF 4 is something different. There's also the VR game. The VR game is just too much. That is Anxiety Simulator 101. I'm not fucking with the VR game, especially because it has FNAF 4 in it. Yeah, I'm not messing with the VR game. FNAF 1 and 2 also were decently scary, even though they are just kind of the low-hanging fruit of tons of jump scares, and some of the later ones are able to scare me a little bit, but none of them have ever come close to FNAF 4. FNAF 4 really did actually scare me more than almost any other video game. It took me forever to beat this game because I just didn't want to play it. I was just like, I actually feel so uncomfortable that I don't want to play a video game. Yeah, the guy who's played over 2,000 games doesn't want to play this because he's so scared of it. Like, fuck Five Nights at Freddy's 4, man. This game is just fucking terrifying. But I don't think it would be fair to say FNAF 4 is the scariest game I've ever played. The scariest game I've ever played is Resident Evil 7. Resident Evil, it really is like the scariest horror series of them all, and I think the scariest game really is Resident Evil 7. This game really revived the series and ushered into a new era for not only Resident Evil but Capcom in general, and there's a reason. It's because Resident Evil 7 was a damn good game. I remember when I first played this game, I didn't really know what to expect, but I walked away from it going, that was one of the scariest experiences I've ever had, and looking back, it really was like the scariest game I've ever played through. Sure, it isn't constant anxiety like Five Nights at Freddy's 4, but this game, it goes for all types of horror. It gets under your skin, it's unsettling, it's creepy, it's disturbing, it's dark. It goes for the low and high hanging fruit with the jump scares. Some of them are really obvious and feel like they're going to get everybody. Some of them, they're a bit deeper than that, and it's the entire game. Like, this game just has a ridiculously unsettling atmosphere. All of the vibes are just scary. The environments are scary. The Baker family, while there are certain parts that are pretty funny, they're funny because of just how creepy and disturbing they are. The Baker family are actually like the scariest things in the entire Resident Evil series, in my opinion. There have been plenty of scary moments in the RE series. Mr. X in Resident Evil 2, especially the remake, he is not fucking around. He is actually mad scary, and he alone should be on this list. But I only wanted to choose one Resident Evil game, and I think the Baker family really is actually terrifying. All of them. They're all scary as hell, and for totally different reasons. Some of them are really upfront with how scary they are. Some of them, yeah, they go for the more subtle approach, like the grandma. Man, fuck all of them. Fuck this whole stupid family. The environments are mad scary also, like when you go underground and you're checking out all these dead bodies and some of these creatures are actually coming to life and shit, or when you're going through these dangerous ass swamps and you gotta actually manage your resources. You can get actually totally fucked in this game, like the original Resident Evil games. It's not a total walk in the park. There's all the ridiculous ass traps from the sun. There's plenty of tense boss fights. This game is just tense throughout. It's building tension. The sound design is great. The presentation is just absolutely phenomenal. The world building and atmosphere is something really special. I think the story's really great in this game also. I totally did not see where this was going, and I just think there is no game that is scarier than Resident Evil 7 that I've played. It's got a really great length to it, and it really is tense throughout. Even the end, which I'm not a huge fan of, that's pretty tense as well. It makes it all the better when you finally get to the safe room and you hear that peaceful, calm music and you know you're safe. Like, I know people have said that the other games hit different with the save room. For me, it really was Resident Evil 7. Like, I remember when I first played this game just being scared to death of it, and all these years later, I genuinely still think that it is very scary. While I love plenty of the Resident Evil games, and I think there are plenty of scary games in this series, 7 really is the one that gives me the creeps. And speaking of creeps, that's going to be today's code word. If you made it to the end of this video, please comment creeps. You will get a heart from me. Thank you so much for making it to the end. Tell me, what is the scariest game you've ever played? It doesn't even have to be a horror game. There are plenty of non-horror games that have also scared me with sudden erratic movement or just creepy things in general. Let me know down below. Hope you all enjoyed it. Hope it was what you're looking for. Happy Halloween, happy Christmas, whatever's closest to you. And with that, I say bye-bye now. See ya.